So welcome to the Chapel Art Spoken Word evening, which we've decided to hold on Zoom this evening, in light of what we thought were going to be escalating Omicron numbers. Anyway, as we speak, those numbers are hopefully coming down and we're on plan A from the government as of today. Yeah. So we'll see where that takes us. Okay, so I'm going to start us off with a story called It Takes All Sorts. And you'll get the gist of it when I start reading it. It's the little things, the stories that I'm putting towards possibly doing a memoir. But at the moment, they're just all short stories. Apologies, Mark might have heard this one already, I'm afraid.
That's right.
It takes all sorts. It had been a long day. An 8-hour delay for the flight to Mallorca had not helped. As we arrived at the hotel, it was dusk, so we dumped our bags and went straight to the restaurant as instructed at check-in. The evening meal at the hotel didn't go well. It was bad English food, mixed with wine that could probably pass as a cleaning product. We walked wearily back to the hotel room, which was located in an annex, somewhere along a now very dark track. Martin wasn't happy. "I'm not eating in there again," he ranted. "I could have stayed in England if I'd wanted to eat English food. I might have known your dad would pick a hotel like this to stop him. And what was that all about? You've got to sit at this table? I'm on holiday. I'll sit where I bloody well like." "I know, you're right, Martin, but it's full board. We can't really afford to eat out as well," I replied. "Well, we either eat out in the evening or we go home," Martin continued. But I'd stopped listening and was frozen on the spot. "Oh my God," I shrieked. "Look at all those cockroaches." "Great. A cockroach-infested hotel. Could it get any worse?" Martin had huffed. As we approached the light of the corridors in the annex, the full horror could be seen. The cockroaches weren't alone. There was a long line of ants that seemed to be on a mission. We followed the industrious ants to our door. As Martin flicked on the light, we could see the ants marching towards a bag. My hands trembled as I reached down to the bag that we'd hurriedly left on the floor. My opened bag of licorice all sorts was smothered in hundreds and hundreds of ants. It was at this moment that I'd wished I'd never wanted or asked for a holiday abroad. I really wanted to go home. And that was October 1988. Somewhat put me off all sorts.
Where was the hotel?
For a long time. It was Porto Cristo. Have you been?
No. Don't do exotic. I do Italy, France, Austria, and Belgium. Those are the only ones I've done.
Yeah, well, I think
Luxembourg as well.
I think that there's the quite famous caves of Drac, rings a bell there. So we went there. I mean, you know, we sort of turned the holiday round and had a very nice time in the end, but expensive because we paid for the food twice, basically. So that was that. Okay, who'd like to go next?
Gentlemen.
Well, I'll do Tony next because Dave's actually muted his microphone, so we'll do Tony next.
I didn't actually think I had anything. I've been sort of trying to finish off the book and then sort of work through it and spot all the errors. But I looked through a file this afternoon and I found this, which I must have written 20 odd years ago. And it's a little bit on the same sort of theme that you're on, Simone, but
Good.
probably slightly less alarming. I called it when I wrote it, Memories of a Rural Childhood. We all have childhood memories, good or bad, happy or sad, general or specific. We can all remember some events in our lives with vivid clarity, so that years later, the slightest sounds of the bloody clock or the faintest smells can immediately transport you back to those long past times. The smell of a paraffin lamp always places me back inside the wooden cowshed that stood in the field of our family smallholding. Originally, it had had a thatched roof, but that had caught fire when ignited by a spark emitted from the funnel of a passing steamroller. The fire had been put out by my father, my mother, and a very elderly aunt, throwing after bucket of water onto the smouldering straw. The cowshed was saved, but my dad ripped off the rest of the thatch and replaced it with sheets of zinc, which seemed to have been a very common material available in the early 1950s. To me and my twin brother, the cowshed, or the shippen as we called it, only became a magical place when my dad added a small half loft over 2 cow stalls and the adjoining calf pen. And we then started to store a few broken bales of hay in that space. Even then, the magic wasn't complete, but if we had a week-old calf in the calf pen being bucket fed with powdered milk, then the warmth of the calf and the smell of the hay, and surprisingly also the cowpats on the floor, made the shippen a very secure and cosy place. The shippen had no electricity or running water, and at night the only light available came from the paraffin storm lantern that hung from the rafters. Sometimes at night I would creep into the cowshed, climb the wooden ladder into the loft, and in the flickering light of the lantern watch the shadows play on the zinc roof of the building, and listen to the quiet breath of the calf as it slept. Almost certainly I created a fire risk, and had that lamp dropped from its hook onto the floor, it could have been disaster. I'm not a religious person, although I was more so then than I am now, but lying snugly amid the hay, I often wondered if the stable in Bethlehem some 2,000 years earlier had been a little bit like this. The shippen wasn't always a peaceful place, however. As the calves grew up, they had to be TT tested for bovine tuberculosis. Modern farms have metal cattle stalls into which the cows can be driven, which have apertures through which the heads emerge and bars that can hold them in place, while the vet carries out a test. It's a bit like the test we carry out on children at school, only with bigger needles. I mean, we had none of those things. As a strong teenager, I remember holding cattle in place against a shippen wall, usually using bodily weight alone, but employing the old farmer's trick of inserting finger and thumb into a cow's nostrils and at the same time twisting its tail with the other hand if it struggled. I don't think this would be regarded as politically correct these days, but it seemed to work, and the vet always managed to inject them. On a small farm, rats were sometimes a problem. Next to the shippen was another wooden shed we called the tool shed. As I remember, it had no windows and was full of old tools, which even 50 years ago looked like they'd come from a museum. There were axes and adze and pitchforks, which we called pikels, and sickles, which we called badging hooks, scythes, wooden hay rakes, block planes, and very many more things beside. It was also used as the barn or the granary. At one stage, when I was still quite young, we kept over 400 free-range hens, mainly Rhode Island Red and light Sussex, but from time to time we added white leghorn because they were tremendous layers. They could also fly almost like pigeons, and you'd see them sometimes roosting in the higher branches of the damson tree. which stood next to the hen house. In total, I remember we had at least 6 wooden hen cotes dotted around our 2 fields, as well as a wooden coal hut and the shed my brother and myself kept our pigeons in. Initially, we had white fantail pigeons, but they were joined by homing pigeons, usually young racing birds that had given up the race, and over a period of time, they intermingled and bred. Sometimes my brother and myself would take live birds to the cattle market to be sold. If we were lucky, and long after we received our cash, the birds would return to the loft, 1 or 2 of them doing this on more than one occasion. In the barn, the food for the hens and pigeons was stored. Dad fed the hens on wet mash in the morning and in wheat in the afternoon. And there were also bags of limestone grit to provide calcium for the birds, although that seemed a bit cannibalistic to me. When the grain arrived on the lorry, it came in 100-weight sacks, which had to be carried to the barn. The soft meal was poured into a large metal bin and then scooped out into a bucket when needed to be used. The wheat was decanted into 2 very large old-fashioned milk churns, which were cylindrical in shape, although much narrower at the top than at the bottom. On one occasion, a small quantity of wheat was left in the bottom of one of the churns, which had inadvertently been left uncovered because there was so little grain left in it. Sometime later, my dad remembered that there was little grain left in the churn and reached into it with a scoop to get the final contents out. He felt something run up the entire length of his arm. He brushed it off. It was a rat, and when he looked down, there were 13 more of its companions, which were also trapped. My brother and I were quite young at this time, and I didn't actually witness the event, but I know my dad went to a nearby farm and that he returned with the farmer, and together they carried the milk churn into the field. And after stirring the rats up a little with a stick, they released them one by one to give sport to the farmer's young Jack Russell Terrier. The final result was rats 0, Terrier 14. And I'll stop at that point. I don't want to go on too long, but that was though for genuine memory, put it that way.
That was evocative, Tony. There are things you described there that I can remember happening in my neighbourhood when I was a lad. The descriptions of Shippen I liked, and the hens, the granary store, the rats in the milk churn. No, that's I'm not never experienced anything like that.
One of the things I don't mention in the story, but what I remember, we used to get from time to time 100-day-old chicks from the wherever, I don't know, and when you put them in an incubator heated by a small paraffin lamp, and the chicks would grow and become hens. One of the problems that we had is that one year a swallow or house martin decided to build its nest inside the same hen cote, so we had to be very careful not to disturb the house martin when we fed the chickens. But chickens and house martins survived. And the only other thing about getting 100 chickens at a time, they're all supposed to be sexed, but you always found that of 100 chickens, 5 at least would be cockerels, and then you have young cockerels, and about 9 months later they'd all be sort of leaping up and fighting each other, and sometimes quite fiercely. But that was a long time ago in a different millennium.
Yeah. Whereabouts was the farm then, Tony?
It was about 4 miles outside Macclesfield. It was in a place called Over Alderley. It's now quite a rich place because it's only just up the road from Alderley Edge and Prestbury. And in Alderley Edge, there's loads and loads of professional footballers we've got in mansions and stuff like that. But ours was just a small 7-acre smallholding, and we had a few dairy cattle and a few hens. And my dad had retired. He was a lot older than Mum, and really it was her way to eke out his pension.
Yeah. Well, I was that way at weekend. We went to Mottram Hall.
Well, my son used to work there. He used to manage the clubhouse, the golf clubhouse, but also a bars manager at Mottram Hall for a while. Yeah. So we know that very well.
Yeah. like you say, well, very, very posh area, isn't it? Right, okay. Mark, do you want to go next?
Yes. Just a little bit of the novel that I'm writing. This is a story narrated mostly by the protagonist, Madeline, who, with a head injury when she was 13, lost her childhood memory, possibly for psychological rather than physical reasons. But has got through school and is about to go up to Durham University to read English, but has just returned from the end of school and beginning of university holiday in Mallorca, where she has, well, she's been rather wild, let's put it that way. And now she's gone to visit her mother.
We point out that we haven't made it that the theme be Mallorca.
No, but it is pure coincidence.
This isn't a beach in Mallorca either behind me. We shall explain that in a bit. Let you get on.
Yes, I mean, yes, and well, her mother is now living in Chelsea. So I went to Mum's flat off the old Brompton Road the day before her birthday. Even without makeup, her face had few laughter lines and hardly a hint of double chin. Would I look as good at 44? After that week's holiday, I felt about 90. Oh, Maddie, Majorca, such a beautiful island. The Puig Mayor, Fornalutz, Billericay, soaring heights, villages forgotten by time. What a wonderful holiday for you. Oh, I wish I were young again. How I envy your tan. She hugged Snuffles, the pug. Age isn't withering you, Mum, nor custom staling your infinite variety or whatever. What are the Puig Mayor and Fawn what's it? Oh, don't you think so? What a sweet daughter you are. Everything about you flows, I thought. Conversation, movements, hair. Where do you get it styled? Laughter, that amazing dress, money from your accounts. Will I be able to keep you in your old age? All the rows I've heard you have with Dad have been about money. Your necklace is gorgeous, Mum. She conjured a bottle of Quinta de Azevedo from the wine rack, flourished glasses, and enacted a ballet of pouring. Andrew has exquisite taste, hasn't he? Andrew? He was Antony to my Cleopatra longer ago than I wish to recall. He and his wife have split up. He'll be with us for dinner. And overnight, I thought, fussing Snuffles. Oh, puke, here we go again. Who was the guy who played Benedict in her Much Ado, the bald, dumpy one with the sweaty lip? The necklace grew great on her, though, so maybe Andrew had taste. He'd need to have. Taste surrounded her. House in tune with the dictates of Feng Shui and all that. Out of the blue, Mum asked, are you on the pill, darling? You mustn't risk accidents, University. Your little accident knows better than to risk accidents, Mum. She had no idea how her sweet daughter had enjoyed Majorca, and I'm sure she'd no idea how your heart sinks when you throw up after a night's boozing and see your pill floating atop the vomit. You weren't an accident, Maddie. You were planned. Like you were married 5 months before I was born. We were married immediately after your father had completed his period of mourning for Ruth. That's irrelevant. Beautiful young women attract countless men. Yeah, like dustbins attract flies. And you must learn to dress rather than merely being clothed. Wearing that shapeless top is like covering a Gainsborough portrait with sacking. What's wrong with it? £5 in a sale. It's a 10. The 8 was too tight over my boobs and the cuffs were halfway to my elbows. Anyway, I have some gorgeous clothes. I sipped the Quinta de Azevedo, wishing I could get my hips into size 8 trousers. Even some 10s were tight. Nice wine, Mum, very light. I took Snuffles to the park. By the time we returned, Andrew had arrived. We went to a Thai restaurant and Andrew paid. I didn't like him, but I was happy to celebrate Mum's 44th with him the following day. Your hat is astounding, Sally, he told her. She's called Cornucopia, said Mum. Yes, all my hats have names. The warriors of myth and fable named their swords. People name their cars. I name my hats. She needed us both. She didn't want to be 44. She was worried I'd be hurt by a man, and I was worried she'd be humiliated by one. I suppose it's always the same with mothers and daughters. 2 weeks later, she went on holiday to Crete with Dad.
Yeah, I like that. That's very good, very descriptive. Some of the description, some of the I'm trying to think. A couple you talked about the almost like sackcloth. What was the line that you came up with?
Yes, that's right. Wearing that shapeless top is like covering a Gainsborough portrait with sacking.
Yeah, I thought that was a lovely line. So what is the story actually about? What's the novel about?
Oh, well, it's in a sentence, it's a deconstructed Mills and Boon romance. If you take any Mills and Boon romance and write all the characteristics of the heroine and the hero on cardboard, because that's the only possible medium, and then ask this question: suppose there were two real live people with those characteristics. How did they get to be like that? What are their backstories? And what would happen when they got together? That wouldn't be happily ever after, because the male, the hero, the alpha male, is a cigarette paper's width away from being a psychopath. And as for her, well, yeah, not an innocent young maiden, that's for sure.
Oh dear.
So that's basically what it's about. But it's got all sorts of complications and subplots thrown into it. That's the main thrust of it.
I like the idea of naming your hats.
Yes.
After all, why shouldn't they? If you can name your swords and cards.
Yes, quite. Why not name your hat? Yeah, well, yes, Sally is that sort of eccentric. She's a brilliant actress with an Olivia Award for her stage work and an Oscar for one of her films, for lead actress, and ends up becoming Dame Sally. But she is decidedly eccentric, as one can tell. She's.
Shall look forward to that finished article, Mark.
Well, so do I. It's a long novel, a long, very complicated novel.
How many words in are you now then?
116,000.
Wow, that's War and Peace.
Yeah, is it not really like, can you not split it into two?
No, War and Peace is about 600,000. No, it's a long novel, but it's not massive.
Is it not splittable?
No, not really.
I find it get too heavy.
I think the average sort of paperback novel that you pick up tend to be between about 80,000 to 120,000. That seems to be that sort of.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, 100 plus or minus 20 is about the size. This is going to be on the top end. It's going to be 120 or a little more, probably 125 by the time it's finished.
Can you not push some of them my way? just got to just over 10,000.
Yeah, well, as we all know, you write a novel and some bits, woof, I've written 2,500 words today, and it goes and it goes and it goes. And then you hit a period where for 2 weeks you've just not been able to get anything on paper at all.
No, I've got a couple of ideas in my head. it was particularly useful going to Mottram Hall. I overheard a little story in the sauna, and I actually got a character with his name that they were talking about, and I said, "Oh," because they hadn't really, not sort of like, they'd been talking all day like women do, and then they'd sort of like realised when they looked round that there was other people in the sauna that weren't party to their, to their conversation, and it was quite a thingy subject about a friend, and then they suddenly like, oh, what does anybody else think? There was a couple of guys in there, and I said, actually, I'm writing a book. I've got a character with that name, and she could. I could do something with this idea that you've just spun my way. So,
well, that's it. You pick things up and use them.
You do, and it is funny. Loads of stuff have come to me in the last couple of weeks. I just need to get them on paper now.
Yeah, just always take your notebook with you. Yes.
Yeah, but because you think I'll remember it, but then things are starting to.
No, you need the notebook with you, and you need the notebook at your bedside.
Not sure about
when you wake up at 2:30 with an idea.
I don't know whether it's true or not. I mean, I've heard Shakespeare used to frequent the brothels in the east of London.
Oh, yes.
And he used to eavesdrop. And that's how so many ordinary words have got into Shakespearean novels. And
without a doubt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at a place such as Henry IV, Part 1, and I mean, there are scenes in a tavern there, and I mean, oh, heavens above, that was all overheard, that was all observed. Yeah.
Was it Shakespeare or was it Ben Jonson? The line that I got in my head from grammar school 60 years ago, but the advice given by one character to another was to keep your foot out of brothels and your hand out of plackets. And the placket was the slit in a woman's skirt. So it was either Jonson or Shakespeare said that, but Johnson. I don't know which. It was Jonson.
Yes, it was Jonson. It's what's it called, that play? Oh.
It wasn't The Alchemist, was it? No,
no, not The Alchemist. I dashed if I can remember, but it's certainly Jonson.
Because it made us, when you're 14 and you have, you just sit there and snigger.
Oh, yes.
You're very good at sniggering at 14.
Oh, you are, yes. It's 14 is definitely the age of the snigger. Yes, that's.
Now, that's a good title for a book as well.
The age of the snigger, yes. That's good, Tony. I like it, yes.
And it is funny, actually, that a word will come to you, like, and you'll think, oh, I've got to get that in the next book or piece of writing. Because it's a good word, isn't it, that snigger?
Oh, yes.
I think I might have had sniggering in the last novel.
Yes. Yes, well, it probably was at some point.
Definitely. Actually, funnily enough, I have obviously read my first novel many, many, many times on the computer, but I wanted to refresh myself with the characters because I'm going to do a sequel to it, and I wanted to just refresh my memory with the different characters and what was going off in that first book, and I've just finished it at weekend. So yeah, I had a bit of sniggering myself.
Don't make a typing error. You've got your GERING, but don't put BU in front of that because it's an entirely different concept.
That would really alter things, yes.
Right, okay, without further ado, we better head over to Dave.
Indeed, yes.
Now, the title of my talk is Art of Grandparenting. Now, this is, again, I write diaries. This is from my page of my diary. And I'm going to, because of the time restriction, I'm going to read just the first 2 paragraphs. So it may seem to end very abruptly, and that's because I'm reading only part of it.
Are you going to read the other bit in the second half?
Well, I could, but I think I've got somewhere else. I'm not here.
Okay.
I have 3 gorgeous grandchildren who have brought new meaning to my life. I adore them, watch them every step of the way as they grow up, initially from a baby in arms, into a toddler, and then into a kid. FaceTime and WhatsApp are 2 great innovations that have brought us together, whether we are under the same roof or cities apart. The virtual media takes away the pressing need for a face-to-face meetup and allows better registration of small events that often happen in the peripheral field of vision, which could have otherwise easily gone unnoticed or forgotten, given the brief moments during which they happen. Grandparenting is not easy, and I have learned this the hard way. It requires a novel set of skills, which one can never learn through books or acquire at universities. It also requires a certain type of fitness that cannot be gained through regular exercise or by attending a gym. Finally, it calls for patience, endurance, and ability to cope with certain degree of untidiness. Although the latter can be quite unsettling for we the adults, particularly those who have got used to living draped in orderliness. But for kids, such an environment acts as a nursery, allowing germination of new ideas in their little minds. Kids are constantly in the process of exploring their immediate environment, and active learning is built into every step they take. However, unlike adults, their acts never fit into any form of routine, nor can they go with any steady form of flow. As I watch my little Maya play with her doll's house, I can clearly see that her little move is prompted by volleys of wonder and curiosity inside her head, whether it is in trying to put the pieces together or in dismantling the whole thing. Unlike we, the adults, their minds are intensely focused on the present. Past does not exist, as their little brains cannot hold memories for too long, nor can they foresee the future. We, the adults, in contrast, either like to dwell in the past or brood about the future. And certainly we have got to learn a lot from the kids. Maya's playroom is littered with her toys of countless shapes and forms. The speed by which she switches her focus from one to the other is an object of huge interest to me. I can spend hours watching and admiring her in her own theater of activity. Often I become possessed with an intense desire to get inside her head and view the world through her eyes. I bet it is what Alice saw in her Wonderland. If there is one thing I crave at my age, is to sum up the wonder that is locked inside her head. But if grandparenting is a thing of joy, it is not without its negative aspects, particularly if it is not planned properly. Proximity to your children changes the dynamics of interpersonal relationship between the adults sharing their care. Expectations can suddenly start to take new forms and even get out of control. The threshold of disillusionment can touch new low. The old adage that familiarity breeds contempt suddenly becomes so palpably true. Before over-enthusiasm takes its grip, I remind myself that the balance between reaching and overreaching is a delicate one and not an easy one. Whenever I'm in my son's house, I'm extra careful not to upset their way of doing things. I tried to contribute to the household activities like cooking, cleaning, or regular emptying of the bins. We carry our own bed linen, and we bring our own dirty laundry with us. We take the kids out for a spin, and our way back, drop at the local Tesco. I am of the opinion that in today's age of self-sufficiency and economic independence, the rules of interpersonal relationship have become reset. our children, though compelled by circumstances into seeking our help, nevertheless are reluctant to be seen in the eyes of their friends to be milking their parents. And therefore, for any family interaction to be successful, it has to benefit both sides in equal measure. It must be a win-win exchange.
Thanks, Dave.
Very true, that.
It's a very interesting reflection, that, Dave. You know, how things have been, how things have been reset by the times we live in, and it is affecting family relationships, isn't it? It's reflecting the attitudes of one to the other. But I loved your description of the grandchild fascinated by. I mean, it is, and their curiosity.
Yes.
And exploring everything. The intense curiosity about the world around them. And that's the thing, isn't it? When you get very young children like that, feed the curiosity, give them every stimulus you can, you know, get them out and see things. And, you know, and in simple ways answer their questions, even when they're not yet articulate enough to ask the questions. The questions are there, they just haven't got the words for them.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think somebody asked David Attenborough, how do you become so engaged with environment? He said, I'm still a child. When we start our lives, we are all children. But somewhere down up as we grow up, we seem to lose that bit of curiosity about our environment. But as regards this interpersonal relationship, now I spent half of my life in India, and I grew up as a child in India. And obviously, there's a lot of differences in our social makeup, in the environmental, in the economic, stature of people. Now, when I was a kid, most of the families were sitting within joint family holdings, where the grandfather used to head the family, and the dynamics between the children and their parents and their grandparents, in terms of who gives what and who expects what, is totally different from what we see now today in this age of affluence, when everybody has the ability or capability to buy, to acquire, and so strangely enough, I mean, when you become mature, adult, retired, you have certain amount of money in your bank, and you would like to lavish out on your children or grandchildren. But you find that they are self-sufficient. There is nothing they expect of you, And it's very difficult to bring that happiness, which you would have otherwise obtained, if you give a toy to a child in, say, in rural Africa, that sort of expectation and admiration and what should I say, won't be there here in the children, because here the children, they grow up with so much of affluence, with so much of toys around them, that the expectation is not there. And it's very difficult to meet their expectation with buying things.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's consumerism, it affects the very young.
Yep.
And the advertising agencies exploit that. I mean, I hate watching television adverts during the day when it gets towards Christmas, because it is aimed at well,
it's gone wild, it's gone mad.
It's crazy. I mean, and I really don't like it at all. And the problem is the surfeit of toys that children always want because they're being pushed at them don't actually do anything good for their curiosity. A toy that does all sorts of things doesn't allow questions to be asked.
And every time you buy something or bring something new, it has a diminishing return.
Yeah. Yes, it does. It's rather nice when you get children whose curiosity has been well stimulated.
Yes.
That somebody buys them a toy in a box, and they look at the toy and play with the box, and the box serves all sorts of purposes for them. Because the box doesn't dictate anything; it can be dictated to. That's a very interesting thing to observe.
I remember, been at my nana and granddad's and been intrigued with, she had a big Welsh dresser, and I used to just love just rooting through that Welsh dresser, and what's these, and so like knitting needles and all sorts of bits and just everything in there.
Yes.
And I loved another little box that had buttons in.
Yeah.
That was the button box.
Yes. Oh yes.
Just the simple things. And she used to make outfits for the dolls.
Yep.
So you never know, that sort of thing might come back. It might come full circle with going back to the simpler things.
I think we would need a significant economic collapse for that to happen.
Oh, that's
scheduled
for next Tuesday, I think.
I think.
Oh God! Better sell my shares then.
Nice one, Tony. I like that.
Right, I shall try and read Holly's poem. Try and do it justice. Now, Tony, is your clock going to chime on the half hour?
No, it only chimed on the hour.
Okay, so it's called Why Would They Not Listen by Holly Crebbin. My eyes peel open. The sun is unbearably bright, hot. Almost as an afterthought, I remind myself that today is my 40th birthday, Christmas Eve. Why would they not listen? My mind wanders nostalgically back to the times of my childhood, where I'd spend hours sitting on my grandpa's knee as he told me stories about the war. I'd listen with unwavering fascination, open-mouthed and inquisitive, as he recollected flickering memories of his youth. Grandpa, can you tell me about the war? The piercing cry of a siren flies past my house as I snap back to today. Today, where my children have no awareness that a beating sun in winter is out of place. Today, where my children do not ask my parents about the war. Instead, Grandpa, can you tell me about the snow? And my father, like his father before him, reminisces upon the things we have lost at the hands of those in power. My heart aches as I sit down to tell my children that we have to move house again, as the merciless ocean chases us inland in constant pursuit of our home and our family, our lives. I think to myself what my grandchildren will ask me about, but a cold, harrowing realization loiters at the back of my mind. I will not have grandchildren to speak with. I will not be able to tell them of the times when the grass was luxuriously green, when the Arctic was occupied by wonderful wild polar bears and penguins, when this crisis was a distant rumour of some other war. They say we have years now, years. I think how quickly the last years have passed, and a tear brims and drops from my eye. Preempted grief plagues our society as we await our future, or lack thereof. And as I stare motionless out of my bedroom window at the parched landscape, desperately clinging to the embers of a past life, I still cannot comprehend the answer to a question I asked as a girl. Why won't they listen? We lined the streets. We pleaded with every morsel of strength within us. We showed them the science, and they claimed they believed us. So why would they not listen? All we hear now are regretful admissions of it's too late. Words engraved with agony for those of us whose lives were placed below their insatiable desire for money and power, within a life where consequences did not matter, a life when it was not too late, a life filled with empty promises. They did not care. My children gaze transfixed at a fading photograph of what they could have had. A world which bathed in the absence of the daily tragedies we face now. A forgotten place that seems so far out of reach. They have been robbed. I have been robbed. The earth has been robbed. And now we pay the price because they would not listen.
Thanks for reading it, Simone. That's, yeah. Okay. It's good to have the message put forward in a forceful way like that. It's a good story.
And it's, yeah, exactly. It's,
yeah.
Well, it's interesting because obviously that's from the point of view, you know, of somebody that's 18. So at the time she might have been 17 when she wrote that. But yeah, it.
I mean, it's written with real passion, and that's great.
Gives you food for thought, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, should we break for say 10 minutes?
Okay.
I'll just.